Hey nerds, welcome back to another custom GPT build. Today we are doing something I've been wanting to do basically since I got into AI automation about a year ago, and that is using AI to write books. Now, I've used base chat GPT to write books in the past, and I've had some success with it, but you need to prompt it to wazoo to get it to produce decent results. Today, we're going to build some custom GPTs to change that. Now in this series, we are going to build 3 distinct custom GPTs because I have found that the writing process includes 3 separate jobs that I think they'll be easiest to separate, but I also think that each job is specialized enough that a custom GPT will be able to handle those tasks specifically, but not all 3. And those are brainstorming, writing the first draft, and revising. You can see here I already have a brainstorming chat open. Not too much to look at here. I just was brainstorming for one of these custom GPTs a while ago, and we came up with an outline template that I really liked, and I pretty much just told it what I remembered and then asked it to recreate it. So now that we have that, we are going to use it to basically build our brainstorming custom GPT. It's our 6 prompt framework. Again, I love this framework. I'm never going to stop using it. Now, let's go ahead and throw the first prompt in there. This first prompt, we're basically just collecting knowledge from the experts on what this custom GPT is going to be doing. So that way we have a bit of an idea what knowledge we want to emulate. Its task is to brainstorm novels in a wide variety of genres, audiences, series, sizes. Okay, good. Research the greatest people in the world who have done this task in this or similar contexts and describe their methods in great detail. Now, we want to be very specific about who we are looking to model. So I'm going to add to this prompt. Here's a list of the major elements that will be in the outline it helps users create. And I'm just gonna go ahead and number these items real quick. Nice tip for those of y'all who are using PC, by the way. If you hit Windows V, that brings up your clipboard history, all the stuff that you have copy and pasted recently. So you'll be able to copy and paste a bunch of different things at once. Really helps with doing complex tasks, especially with AI. So here's those. Helps users create, pick 1 to 2 experts in each area. Teach advice that is the most universal and of the highest quality. In the case of genre specific elements, right? For those, pick expert in specific that genre. Okay, I think we've got a good prompt here. Let's go ahead and run it and see what we get. Guys. Okay, looks like it finished up. Let's check this out. Awesome brief. Here's a tight expert source blueprint for your novel brainstorming GPT, organized by the exact outline sections you listed. For each area, I picked 1 to 2 teachers with the most proven, broadly applicable methods and genre specialists where needed, then distilled their techniques into concrete steps your GPT can ask and enforce during ideation. Okay, well, it's got my attention. I'm liking what it's making here. Core info, log lines and market clarity. Ooh, and when naming the expert, it immediately defends the answer why them. I love it. Clearest, most universal framing for what it is it, and log lines that actually sell. Dude. Okay. Method it should enforce. Answer what is it in 1 sentence that contains irony, a compelling mental image, protagonist goal, and stakes. Have the model test alternatives until irony and image pop. Okay, I like that idea. Quick beat to logline check before moving on to outline. Okay, good. Brian Cohen, best page forward, conversion focused blurbs, industry workhorse for blurbs that convert on Amazon. Okay. Now this is interesting actually, because I've I've come across a blurb framework that I really like. I've used it to generate blurbs for past books that I've written with Claude, for example, and those have sounded nice, but I've never actually tested how they perform in the market. So it's interesting. Method the GPT should enforce for the back of book retailer page. Hook line, brief emotional synopsis. Focus on feelings over plot minutia. Good. Selling paragraph. Subgenre tropes, awards, comp titles, and reasons to read. I like that. Direct CTA, buy or read now to, okay, have the GPT produce 3 variants. Then A/B annotate, which trope words in front. Okay. Characters. The GOAT, Brandon Sanderson's in the house. I love this. I am surprised it didn't pick him for setting, though. He's very well known for his magic systems. Prolific teacher with repeatable tools, methods poured cleanly into prompts. That's very important. I remember back when I was learning how to write with ChatGPT, that's like 90% of what I was doing was just looking up writing advice on YouTube and then writing it directly into the prompt. Head empty, no thoughts. 3 sliders: proactivity, relatability, capability. That makes sense. I like this. Force explicit settings: high, medium, low, and a plan for growth on the weak slider. I like this. Differentiate flaw, handicap, and limitation. The flaw is fixable. The handicap is not their fault and must be worked around. Ooh, and a limitation won't or shouldn't change. Link each to specific scene tests. Ooh, always attach rooting interest. Okay, KM Wayland. Positive, flat, negative character arcs. The most teachable, widely used character arc taxonomy for novelist. Declare the archetype up front, positive, flat, and negative. Map lie the character believes to truth. Progression across acts. So we're going to have, multiple within a single story. I like that. It's going to add a lot of texture to the plot outlines that this creates. I like this. Setting and world building. Jeff Vandermeer, Wonderbook Systems Approach. Gold standard visual holistic world building workbook. Emphasizes idea generation and coherence. Macro to micro sweep. Geography and biome. Culture, law, economy. Daily objects, idioms, sensory specific. Everything is material. Prompts, mine real, anomalies, architecture, ecology, history, then twist. Makes sense. I do that a lot for my own work. Produce maps and lists of social systems and how they generate conflict and imagery. That also feeds a little bit into the plot outline. I like how these expert teachings are doing a very good job at the one thing that I asked them to, but they're also, blending into each other a little bit. I feel like that's going to give our brainstorming custom GPT a strong position to build some winning outlines. Plot structure: Dan Harmon, 8-step story circle. Lean character-centric plotting that snaps into any genre. Fill all 8 steps. You need go, search, find, take, return, change, and make sure the need is the inner problem the theme will resolve. Ask the model to generate 3 circles: whole book, protagonist arc, and series arc if applicable. That's also something that I was kind of struggling to coordinate back when I was working with base ChatGPT, and that was I couldn't really get it to track where the whole book was, and also where the protagonist was, and also where the series was. I could kind of keep those apart in my head and, generate summaries to keep in external memory to help me inject reminders whenever it became relevant. That was kind of my little system there. It's nice to know that won't really be necessary here. John Truby, 22 steps and moral argument. Why him? Unifies premise, structure, and theme. Prevents mechanical beats by rooting plot and ethics. Okay. Start with a designing principle. The engine that shapes plot form, then outline moral argument. Ooh, these are good. Hey, we got our genre specialists. Let's go. Romance. Gwen Hayes, the industry's clearest 20-beat emotional structure for romance. Map the 4 phases with all 20 beats. Ensure an internal arc for each lead and a relationship arc that turns at midpoint and dark night. Auto-insert subtrope levers? Slow burn, enemies to lovers, second chance, and conflict polarity. Ooh, horror. This'll be interesting. A premier horror teacher, Dewey, and a leading contemporary horror novelist, teacher, Jones. Personal dread first. Write what scares you. Let's go. We're gonna have some fun with that one. Then externalize it via situation, setting, and social pressure. The escalating unease, dread, inescapable confrontation, privileged tone, and behavior changing fear over jump scares. I like that that's a thing because jump scares, aren't really a thing in novels. In fact, the word suddenly is one of those weaker words that you can cut out of your drafts a lot of the time because something happened and suddenly something happened means exactly the same thing. You can cut out suddenly 95% of the time the sentence won't change at all. Dewey's classes emphasize character-rooted horror and cultural lenses, have the model articulate what the monster means. That's good. Because a good monster isn't just a big scary thing. Anyone can create that. What not everyone can create is a monster that directly triggers the character's internal conflict. That's the level that we want to see this GPT thinking on. So let's see Brandon Sanderson with sci-fi and fantasy. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. Method the GPT should enforce. Declare understandability, costs and limits, and a don't add new before deepening rule. That's one of my favorites of Brandon Sanderson's rules, so I like that it's keeping that in there. For societies, okay. Mystery and thriller. Fair play detective conventions. Keeps thriller drive tight. Themes and symbols. Robert McKee, controlling idea. Drawn Truby, moral argument woven through structure. And the story is how the plot affects someone. Keeps every thematic move tied to reader empathy and cognitive payoff. Okay, good. I like what we have here. Now, let's jump back over here, grab our second prompt real quick, and I'm just gonna say, based on these methods, create a detailed list of numbered steps to guide its thought process. When writing these steps, think about it from the user's perspective. We're not too worried about the target audience since that's kind of baked into the user's perspective. First step should be as follows. If you don't have all the information you should have from the user, ask for it clearly and specifically. Okay, and go. Okay, looks like it just finished up. Let's take a look at this. Request missing details about clarify the creative targeted constraints. I really don't think we need 2 different steps that clarify things because that kind of backfired with our last project. I like that it does it. I just think it should only need to do it once. Sharp logline, good. State the controlling idea in one sentence. Choose the character arc model and set Sanderson's sliders. Design the protagonist and core cast. Map the web conflict. World build from power outward and from macro to micro. Good stuff. I am a little bit worried that it's going to try to do all those at once, which could be a little overwhelming, even possibly for the thinking model, but we'll give it a shot. Let's see what kind of outputs it gives us. 5 most common limitations of current LLMs. Now, this is our third prompt. This is pretty simple here. All we want to do is put a little paragraph in our system prompt to defend from the weaknesses that are inherent in ChatGPT and similar LLMs, which is that they hallucinate, they're a bit over the top in how they deliver things, which is especially a problem concerning creative tasks like this. They match lazy patterns, which again is more of a problem with creative tasks. And also, it's confidently inaccurate, which isn't too much of a problem. I mean, a little bit like when you're trying to, research something very important representing a minority group, for example. So it is something we want to keep in mind. Ooh, we might have to cut that down. Still, I'm glad it's there. Create 2 bulleted lists in Markdown format. These are going to be in our input and output guardrails. So if you guys have ever been dropped into a job with no training and expected to do well, you know what it feels like to be set up to fail. Input guardrails are there to make sure that we don't accidentally do that to this custom GPT. It's a bit of a protective buffer, and the whole reason it's there is essentially as a quality check on what we're sending to the AI when we ask it to do its job. And as you've seen in the procedure, it is already trained to kind of go ahead and ask us for clarification when it doesn't understand something. Output guardrails are the reverse. They are quality checks on what the AI sends back to us. If we make sure that no trash whatsoever gets sent between the two of us, that's your number one defining trait of a winning custom GPT, or any AI agent for that matter. Now, let's do the fun one, the knowledge base blueprint. This is gonna be fun. All right, now, research and develop the best custom knowledge base this GPT can possibly have. Remember, we don't want to randomly dump PDFs. That's like what 90% of custom GPT creators do, and it just that just creates a document swamp. Don't do that, guys. It's not valuable. It's just big and messy. Specifically in this prompt, we are asking it to grade data sources based on these 4 criteria: density, accuracy, necessity, and then we're going to ask it to give us those scores. So that way we can decide what really needs to be in our custom GPT. Files that are publicly available. I want to include a custom file that comprises expert knowledge specializing in 24 different types of genres listed below. And that is in here somewhere. Is it this one? Yeah, here we go. I already know how to make the PDF file. Just add the entry. Okay, and we'll let it think. Let's actually look at its thought process. For detective fiction, books like James, they're copyrighted, so linking to, okay, yeah, I'm looking into resources like Stephen Graham Jones interviews and lectures on YouTube, World Building 101, talking about detective fiction publisher page. There are also helpful guides like John Truby's Anatomy of Story and James Scott Bell's Law Concept. I'll gather relevant content. It's kind of fun to read AI's thought process sometimes. All right. Below is a surgical high-yield knowledge base plan. No swamps, only sources your brainstorming GPT will actually use at the keyboard. Each item has a purpose and why it's irreplaceable, plus a 4-part score. Public items include links. Custom items include exact build specs. See, this prompt is awesome. Brandon Sanderson, BYU Creative Writing Lectures, YouTube playlist. So, we are going to have to transcribe some really, really long YouTube videos in order to create this as like a knowledge base item, but I do think it would be quite valuable. Look at that, 370%. I just ask it to add them because, I figure it's less math than calculating the average. And I want it to be focusing on the actual quality of the knowledge it is asking me to gather. Sanderson's Laws of Magic, first law and consolidated lecture notes. Okay, this is good because we were just talking about how much work it is going to be to have Brandon Sanderson's BYU lectures in there. Prevents Deus Ex Machina and SFF brainstorming. Okay, I like that. The industry shorthand for system design constraints. Okay, look at this. It gives you so much. I tend to only use the 4 or 5 highest scores. So yeah, Wonderbook visual systems-based world-building prompts forces the GPT to map who has the power and why. Setting generates story pressure, avoids trivia dumps. Okay, that's a big thing I wanted to avoid. So good. 8-step story circle, anatomy of story, Robert McKee, just story. One-word titles are interesting. Romance. Gwen Hayes romancing the beat. We haven't seen a total score over 378% yet, and that's interesting to me. SFF Systems Worksheet, Sandersonized, what? Structure Spine Card, Romance 20 Beat Planner, Mystery Fair Play Pack, here we go, 24 Genre Expert Modules. PDF. Motion Expression Mini DB. That'd be interesting. Blurb Conversion Playbook by Cohen. I think that would be a good idea to just have as a PDF. Okay, cool. Because now we are asking it to put together everything it just told us into a system prompt for our custom GPT. Specialized novel, brainstorming and outlining architect. Okay, now I can already tell you that this is almost certainly going to be too long for the 8,000 character limit for system prompts. We run over that limit quite often when we do it this way, but only by a couple of characters. So I've never seen it as much reason to tighten the process. Now over here is where we're actually going to go into our custom GPT creator to actually build this thing. Now we're going to hit explore on this GPT's box here. Now this is the GPT store. You can go ahead and look at any and all custom GPTs that have been publicly created. I kind of skip them, honestly, because not a lot of people build custom GPTs our way. Now, up at the top on the right, you will see an option that is only there for plus users and above, which is My GPTs. So you can look at custom GPTs you've built in the past. In fact, I've built pretty much I did not build that one. All the others I did. And you'll also see the option to create a new one. And that's what we're going to do today. Now, this is the workspace you're going to see. You can see on the left, we have create or a configure options. Create is basically if you just want to message ChatGPT and have it build the custom GPT for you, which is kind of what we did here, if I'm completely honest. However, I rather just go straight to the configure page from here, just because this process gives us a little bit more control. The create function can be a little unpredictable at times, and in my experience, it does more harm than good. So we're going to pop open the system instructions box. This is going to be our GPT's central identity. Its core functions, its core instructions, who is it, what does it behave? Now we want to copy this and paste it directly into, it's too long. Can you tighten the roll and both notes sections to 2 to 3 sentences each while retaining its effectiveness? Holy cow, these sentences are long. Still, they're a little bit better than, they're a lot bit better than the originals. Something else you can do to save a couple of characters easy, cut out the enter keys. ChatGPT gives you a whole lot. Technically, you don't need any of them. ChatGPT is pretty good at organizing information that is just put in a text block. So we've got those enter keys taken care of, and we are still seeing that too long error message. At this point, I usually just copy the current system prompt. Yeah, see, look, that is 13.2 thousand characters. We need to cut this in half, basically. Okay, so I made the edits you suggested to the system prompt, as well as cutting out the unnecessary enter keys, but it's still too long. In fact, Google Docs is telling me it's 13,226 characters when we actually need 8,000 characters. So can you suggest ways that we can chop it in half, basically, while keeping the same effectiveness? I've included the current system prompt below. OpenAI's Whisper is so cool. Like, look at that. 13,226. Most speech-to-text models would just say that as words. That keeps the same spine and should land well under 8,000 characters. Compact system prompt, V2 ready to paste. If info is missing, ask clearly and specifically. Yeah, I like that tightening. Yeah, look at that. It's 6,200 characters. This will be much easier. Let's try this. Contact hello at Blackfish automations.com if you need assistance. Perfect. And everything above this, we can just go ahead and look at that. It's magically ready to use. I'm gonna call it Novel Team 1. Storm novel outlines cross varied genres, audiences, etc. Okay, now let's go back up to where it summarized our knowledge base items. Okay, let's get Sanderson's first law of magic as our example knowledge base. I like magic systems. That's probably evident to those of you who've read my work. That's a good law. I like this. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do this then. Since I don't see a download option, we are going to hit Control P as if we were going to print it, and look at that. Save as a PDF is an option here that shows up on pretty much any device. I'm gonna hit save, and then I'm going to name it Sanderson and Sanderson Laws of Magic. Perfect. Now, for anybody who might be wondering what I just did there, this is the knowledge section of our custom GPT builder. Now, what that means essentially can directly read them and recall from them while it's doing its job for us. It isn't exactly like fine-tuning or training on new data, since that takes millions of dollars of processing power. But that being said, knowledge is very, very effective at making your custom GPTs better, and I think it's something that everyone should be using. Now, there's a couple other things we can play with here. Conversation starters are handy. For example, help me brainstorm a genre novel for ... See, that has become a button that we can hit on its chat menu, and it will automatically send it, just like ChatGPT's conversation starters. Now, that is a nice way to show off your custom GPT's capabilities, which is nice if you build custom GPTs for other users. I typically build them just for myself, so I kind of tend to ignore the conversation starters, honestly, but handy for those of you who use them. Recommended model is nice as well. I'm gonna be honest, this was a whole lot more useful a couple of months ago, back when we had like 5 gajillion models. Ever since ChatGPT released their 5th version, they've collapsed the selector to 5 thinking, and 4.0 because they've kept that around for some reason. Typically, I just stick with GPT-5 because that way it can think longer to get a better answer when it thinks it should do that, and it will give us an instant answer when it thinks it can do that. So yeah, it's not perfect at deciding when it needs to think longer, but I really like that they're adding this functionality. Capabilities, if you'd like it to search the web or generate images, I don't really know why these are here, because as you can see, they don't show up in the custom GPT's tools when you like ask it to do things. So yeah, I don't really know why that is. And then actions, if you want to create a custom tool, which is, by the way, that's what we're going to be doing with this custom GPT, is you can do the authentication and write a schema, and it can use that to communicate with external software to do all sorts of cool things. In our case, we're going to build a few custom N8N automations to basically to read our outline, to modify it, and to update it. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Now we're just going to call this example outline. Okay, good. And then paste a little bit in here. Okay, I did a bit of manual formatting, so now we can click through our example outline using these headers, which means we're ready to plug it into our N8N build. Okay, now we're going to create a tool that is simply going to allow our custom GPT to read the outline as we create it. The important reason for this as a creative is so that we don't do anything that's out of alignment with our project. My favorite example that I keep coming back to is the Peter Pan remakes. They did a live action remake recently, and they did something that was very effective at what they were trying to do, but they were trying to do the wrong thing, which I thought was very interesting. And that was making Captain Hook a sympathetic villain. In the original, he was a pure evil villain, and the audience loved him for that. The audience loved a lot of the Disney Renaissance movies for that. They gave him a very compelling backstory, but it just didn't land right because the audience was wanting what we've seen in the original and what they loved the original for, which was the pure evil version of Captain Hook. Not that sympathetic villains don't work, they are fantastic in their own right, but those are the kinds of decisions that we want this tool to empower the custom GPT to make. Now, as far as the setup, it's pretty simple. We're going to do a manual trigger just, while we're in testing. Google Docs. Yep, we just want a Google Docs node that gets a document. Yep, we want to use the novel team credential and then grab the doc ID from our example outline. This is the bit in the URL between these two slashes. So document /d/ everything after until the edit or sharing or whatever bit. This is the document ID. This is how we reference Google Drive files in N8N automations, in make.com anything of that nature. We'll use that. So let's go see if it works, and look at that. Executed successfully. Let's have a look. And in our response, we get document ID and content. Now, what we want to add, webhook respond, and let's just give it all incoming items. No webhook found in workflow. Okay, that makes sense, because what we should have done first is add a webhook trigger. This is what the custom action of our custom GPT is actually going to use to trigger this. Now we are going to use, essentially what we're doing here is called an API call. There's something that can be a little bit daunting for folks who are just getting into the AI automation space. Trust me, they're not that hard to set up when you know what you're doing, because they are basically text messages for machines. And these webhook URLs, for example, is how it's like a phone number. It tells us the address of where we're actually going to send our text message. So I'm going to copy this path as well. The important thing to remember about webhook URLs in N8N is that every webhook trigger gives you two, a test and a production. Okay, the test one is simply the one that listens when we use this button, listen for test event. Also, let's plug that into here just while we're here. And if we hit execute workflow from the webhook node right here, it will also use the test URL to listen for a test event. Now, the reason we want to use the production URL is because that's the one that it listens to perpetually when we flip it to active. Now, obviously, we can't do that right now because, okay, so let's give this a test and look at that. it executed successfully, and our webhook response gave us that. Perfect. Perfect. Now we're going to save that, and we're going to come back here and check this out. Get help from Actions GPT is awesome. This is a custom GPT that was made by ChatGPT themselves, by OpenAI themselves. Create a schema for a custom GPT made in October 2025 to send a GET request to this URL. Here is the endpoint /path. Notification is required. The request simply has to start the workflow. Okay, and there we go. Valid 3.1.0 YAML specification for a custom GPT action. Now we're going to copy that code and then paste it into this schema box right here. And let's go ahead and give it a test. Yep, we want to allow it to... Oh, shoot, we haven't activated it. Of course the test wouldn't work. We haven't flipped it on. Let's test it. Allow. Yes. What it say exact successfully, but it didn't return a detailed payload in the response, an acknowledgement that the workflow started. It doesn't appear to have fired at all. So let's grab some screenshots and come back to Actions GPT and put those in. Why isn't this activating? The custom GPT reports success when it tests the action, but the N8N flow doesn't report firing at all. Why is this? Your webhook is in manual test mode, not production mode. So external calls, like from your custom GPT, won't trigger it unless it's actively waiting in the N8N editor. It said active, right? It says active in the screenshots, but if a webhook is not saved and activated, it doesn't listen for external requests when you're not in the editor, so N8N never receives it. The GPT action test doesn't show up in the N8N execution log, meaning your N8N never got the request. Exactly what happens when a webhook is still in manual or test mode. Let's ask ChatGPT about this part. I like that feature of ChatGPT. I've never seen it in the other AI tools that are out there right now, is highlighting text and saying ask, letting you ask clarifying questions about those parts specifically. I mean, the other ones you can, like if you copy it and paste it into your response and quotation marks. But, I thought that flipping the switch to active would essentially activate the N8N scenario, so it would listen on the production URL, which is what we used in the schema. How do we do that? How do I activate the workflow so it listens on the production URL? Activating the workflow should make the webhook listen on the production URL. If it's not working that way, let's go step by step to make sure it's truly activated. And okay, confirm you saved the workflow. Yeah, it's definitely saved. It is extremely saved right now. Top right of the workflow editor. Active toggle is on. Good. Toggled on, it will listen to the production URL. Click the webhook node in your workflow and do the following. Look for something like that. This must match the one you used in your OpenAPI spec and GPT action. Yeah, actually, maybe it didn't copy into the schema exactly. No, it did. Right? Webhook D7A9, 479C, 9A9D, ADA. That is exactly the same web point. Manually test the production webhook. Okay, so we are now using Postman. This is a great tool when you want to test your webhooks. Or wait, no, I think I want to that. Okay, I have the exact schema below that we're using. Could you translate it to a Postman request? Yeah, okay, good. Method is get, the URL, no headers and no body. Okay, so what happens if we just send it then? Internal server error. Okay. Why the 5 500 response. Does it require a header like location/JSON? Here you're getting 500 internal server error from n8n, and it usually happens when the workflow is not active. What about this isn't active? I'm sorry, can you help me figure out what part of this n8n workflow isn't active? It has the toggle switch to active, so I'm just struggling to understand why it doesn't seem to recognize that it's active. And just before, let's go ahead and active toggle. Okay. You try your postman request. There's a subtle but critical that explains why your webhook is still throwing a 500 error is not the entry point of it needs the manual trigger to die. Is that, let's save it. Okay, so what happens if we send it this time? Okay, even after I cut the manual trigger out, the test still failed and threw a 500 internal server error. Can you help me figure out what else could possibly make n8n think that this scenario or this workflow is not active? Almost everything right, but there's one last gotcha that's very specific to how n8n handles webhook URLs in production. No longer matches your webhook node because your workflow has a different internal ID. Oh, so wait, the workflow change when no, it didn't change. What's it talking about? Okay, do you guys see any difference in those? I pulled the second URL directly from this screenshot, but feel free to fact check me. n8n has not fully deployed the workflow. We have multiple workflows using the same webhook path. So what if we changed the path to B1B and then we changed this to B1B, right? B0B, yep, and B1B. Okay, good. Let's save it and send it. All right. Okay, so I've included the exact schema that my custom GPT is now using, as well the Postman test and the webhook node settings. So what I did was just change the second character in the webhook ID from 0 to 1, and then changed it as well in the custom GPT as well as in the Postman test, and it still threw a 500 server error. Is it because I copied wrong or because something else is going on? Okay. The issue you're facing is subtle but crucial. Root cause you manually changed the workflow path without updating the webhook node in n8n to match. Wait a second, is it actually just listening? Yeah, B1B. Wait, were they? It was hitting the new one. Okay. Something internal to n8n that isn't obvious in the U. Yep. It's only one of 3 remaining causes. And internal webhook is stuck. Flush the webhook router. Wait, it doesn't let me save again. What if, I'm curious, can we actually get it to hit the test URL instead and send? No. Okay, well, if we're dealing with something internal to n8n, multiple workflows using the same path, some users report that webhooks occasionally don't activate even though the URI says they are. Okay, can you help me put together everything that we have found out with this so far into an email to the support team? This is cool. All right, well, that's as much as I can really confirm is going on at this point. I mean, if it's an internal error to n8n, then I can't really do anything about it, which means we'll need to retry building the tool on something else like make, or just go without for the time being. So I'm just going to delete the action just for now. Last thing that's really fun before you hit create on your custom GPT is to pick a picture for it if you have a custom photo for it, or you could use DALL-E, which is the image generation model that OpenAI integrated with, I believe it was 2 years ago at this point. It's been a while. So we're going to go ahead and use DALL-E and just see what it comes up with. This is always a lot of fun. I just thought of this. You know what would be fun is if we made a custom GPT for the specific purpose of creating profile pictures for custom GPTs. That would be funny. Oh, I like that. That's actually pretty cool. Okay. And then, so we're just going to go ahead and hit create. For now, I'd like to keep this just for me, but in the future, I can make it anyone with a link or just put it on the GPT store, which would be fun. So, but yeah, that for now, at least, wraps up our novel team 1 build. Now, once you've actually created your GPT, you'll see this little pop up here where you can actually copy the GPT link and you can share it with anyone you would like if you set your privacy settings to that, or you could just go straight to viewing the GPT, and here we go. I can just talk with it right here, right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something about building custom GPTs. And with that, be sure to leave a like, share your thoughts with the class, and before you subscribe, make sure you know what you're doing, because it ain't easy being at the top. We'll see you guys next time.
Hear the echo call.